What if I told you that the French Revolution was not sparked by ideals of liberty and equality, but by a government that went completely bankrupt? Welcome to Timeless Finance. Today, I am inviting you to explore the hidden economics behind one of history's most famous revolutions. But first, I have a quick question for you. Comment down below and tell me, what country are you in and what time is it for you right now? I am really interested in seeing just how global our community is. Now let us get into it. Everyone knows the French Revolution as a story of rebellion against tyranny. But few realize it began with numbers, not ideals. It was not the storming of the Bastille that broke France. It was the storming of its balance sheet. The guillotines came later. The debt came first. France did not fall because of kings or queens, but because it ran out of credit. What happens when a government can no longer borrow, print, or tax enough to survive? History answers with one word: revolution. Let us rewind to France in the 1700s. The country was rich in culture, art, and influence. Paris was the beating heart of Europe. But under the surface, its economy was collapsing. The royal treasury was running on fumes, drained by decades of war and luxury. King Louis XIV had spent fortunes on the Palace of Versailles and endless conflicts. His successors inherited not wealth, but debt. By 1780, France owed more than 4 billion livres, a number impossible to repay. The interest alone swallowed half the annual budget. The deeper problem was structural. France's tax system was rigged from the top down. The richest, the clergy and nobility, paid almost nothing. The poor paid everything. Imagine if your government charged small businesses 80% in taxes while billionaires got exemptions. That was France in 1788. The system crushed farmers, merchants, and workers, yet protected the elite who owned land and lent money to the crown. Every reform attempt failed because those same elites controlled the parliaments. But debt does not wait for politics. It compounds. France's creditors wanted payment in gold, not excuses. The 7 Years' War from 1756 to 1763 had drained the treasury. Then came the American Revolution. France spent over 1.3 billion livres to help America defeat Britain. It weakened an enemy but destroyed its own finances instead. Soldiers returned home as heroes, but the state returned bankrupt. When Jacques Necker, the finance minister, published the royal accounts, ordinary people saw for the first time how deep the hole was. Instead of building trust, it sparked outrage. If France was rich, why were bread prices rising? If the king was wise, why were farmers starving? The publication turned finance into politics and politics into anger. In 1788, the crown did what every modern government does in crisis. It tried to borrow more. But Europe's lenders had lost faith. France's bonds fell. Interest rates spiked. The government could not raise fresh credit. Then nature joined the revolt. A series of bad harvests sent grain prices soaring. Bread tripled in price. People starved while aristocrats held feasts. Every empire learns the same lesson. When the cost of food rises faster than wages, revolutions begin. By 1789, Louis XVI was out of moves. He called the Estates General, a national assembly that had not met in 175 years. Representatives from the Third Estate, everyone outside the nobility and clergy, refused to be ignored. They declared themselves the National Assembly. But notice what triggered it. Insolvency, not freedom or democracy. Debt. When the crown could not pay soldiers, fund pensions, or buy grain, its promises became worthless. Paper notes called Assignats were issued against confiscated church land. It was an early version of quantitative easing, printing wealth from future hope. At first, it worked. Then, as printing expanded, trust evaporated. Prices rose, and soon no one wanted royal paper. This is where economics and emotion merged. Hunger made people desperate. Inflation made them furious. When the monarchy collapsed, the revolutionaries inherited a broken economy. The treasury was empty. Gold had fled the country. So the new government turned to a radical experiment, creating money out of land. They seized properties from the church and nobility, over 6 million hectares of the best land in Europe. They created paper notes backed by that land. Each note represented a slice of future value. But once a paper system starts, it is hard to stop. The government found itself printing more to cover every new expense. Armies needed pay. The poor needed bread. Cities needed supplies. Soon, Assignats were no longer linked to land. They became promises built on promises. By 1793, over 8 billion livres worth of assignats flooded the economy. Prices exploded. Inflation punished savers and shattered trust. Markets became chaotic. Merchants hoarded goods. Farmers refused to sell grain for paper. The black market thrived. The National Convention tried to fight it with laws. They fixed prices, banned hoarding, and declared merchants economic enemies. Guillotines awaited bakers accused of raising prices. But policy cannot override scarcity. The more they printed, the faster value disappeared. Here is where the story turns ironic. The same revolution that overthrew a king for fiscal mismanagement repeated the same mistakes. They thought political purity could defeat mathematics. They were wrong. You cannot legislate trust. For the first time, a nation had tried to link sovereignty directly to money creation. The revolutionaries wanted freedom from the old banking class. Before 1789, private lenders controlled credit. Now, the state tried to take that power for itself. The assignats were early fiat currency, money backed by belief, not gold. Every central bank today echoes that experiment. When the United States Federal Reserve prints dollars, or when Europe expands balance sheets, they are doing a version of what France did in 1790. The difference is control. France printed blindly without restraint. By 1794, the printing presses never stopped. The government printed over 45 billion livres in assignats. Inflation soared past 13,000%. A loaf of bread cost more than a day's wage. Coins disappeared. People bartered again. Soldiers demanded payment in metal. Merchants hid gold. The dream of paper prosperity collapsed. Monetary failure is never neutral. It reshapes power. Whoever controls money controls survival. In France, control shifted from monarchs to revolutionary committees to generals. The chaos set the stage for Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon understood what the revolutionaries ignored. Power needs stable credit. In 1800, he founded the Bank of France, a hybrid model meant to restore trust. The lesson was clear. Ideals without solvency fail. Now, connect this to modern times. When central banks flood economies with liquidity during crises, they are repeating parts of France's playbook. They say it is temporary. They say it is controlled. So did the National Assembly. Every currency collapse starts with good intentions, saving jobs, feeding the poor, funding security. But every printing cycle tests one question. How much trust does your paper hold? In France, trust ran out before gold did. France's collapse did not stay within its borders. What happened between 1789 and 1799 reshaped global finance. For the first time, investors saw how political revolutions could destroy entire currencies. Trust, once broken, does not return easily. The French Revolution introduced a permanent tension between democracy and debt. Popular will wanted spending. Financial stability demanded restraint. The two rarely aligned. When Napoleon rose to power, he restored the franc, tied partly to silver and gold. The new regime promised order, predictability, and balanced budgets. After 10 years of chaos, stability was the real revolution. The notion that money was a political tool took root across Europe. Central banks multiplied. The Bank of France became the model for modern hybrids, public authority with private backing. Why does this matter today? Because every modern nation faces the same temptations. When crises hit, printing money looks easy. Politicians promise stimulus and relief. But behind every promise lies the same arithmetic that doomed France. If output does not match spending, paper fills the gap, and paper without trust turns to dust. Look at Argentina, Zimbabwe, or Venezuela. Each followed the French pattern: deficit, debasement, and collapse. The French Revolution is often told as a battle between classes or ideals. But underneath, it was a balance sheet implosion. Numbers triggered mobs. Inflation turned reform into terror. The attempt to print prosperity built a new kind of poverty, one measured in lost faith. Next time you hear about inflation or deficit spending, remember Paris in 1793. Remember the bread lines, the worthless notes, the promises that could not buy food. Remember how quickly freedom turns fragile when numbers stop adding up. Now I would love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below.